Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not my beat.
Our pleasure to welcome in for his Thursday visit Dan Pizzuta of the 33rd team, one of their lead NFL writers. Dan, what's up? How are you, dude?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am doing well. I'm stunned, though, Dan. Stunned. Do you know why I'm stunned?
I believe so.
So last week, we had a little fun at the end of our chat with your quarterback rankings and how you have some systems in place to ensure that you do not overreact to things. There's a scoring system. There's a baseline level of like, hey, this is kind of what I thought. That way, as things change, you don't get too swayed by one game. And Jayden Daniels was kind of in the middle of the pack because he's still a rookie and all the reasons, and it makes total sense. I look up this morning, Dan, and look who is atop of your quarterback rankings. Why did you move Jayden Daniels to number one? Why did you give in to all of us? Is it because you're coming on the show today?
No, it is not. So after we had that, fairly lengthy discussion of what was going into those rankings last week, we ended up changing what goes into the rankings. So they are now like half of the kind of skill set rankings that I am still doing, watching these quarterbacks every week, kind of grading them on, different types of skills that they have, arm strength, accuracy, things of how these quarterbacks are individually playing. And then we also added to get a slightly more, accurate picture of what's actually happening in 2024. We now have a composite of EPA per play and success rate that is half of the score too. So it's half of still the grades and the skill set that I'm looking at, now half EPA per play and success rate. And when we put the actual production in for 2024, Jayden Daniels jumped to the top, and it's kind of hard to argue with that, with how he's played, and the production he's produced so far.
So is this something that when you've done rankings like this in the past, you reach like a threshold in the season where it's like, okay, there's enough data here to put something more objective from a data standpoint because one outlier isn't going to drive things in an untoward way? Or is this something new that you've added this year in Jayden Daniels because he's been ridiculously productive through 5 games as the beneficiary?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. It kind of got to a point where, through, 4 or 5 weeks is where you can start getting more of a sense of what's going to happen and things aren't going to really, fluctuate quite as much, if you were doing an EPA like base ranking off of, week one, those rankings kind of would have looked a little crazy, but also just kind of looking at trying to get a slightly better, there were some people who wanted more of an actual look of like what was actually happening in 2024. So, having a ranking that still had, Patrick Mahomes as a number one and, some other guys like Jayden Daniels lower. So we decided to, I worked with some of the editors. I kind of came up with more of a ranking that has the best of both worlds, I think, right now. So we still have half of it on like how these quarterbacks are playing kind of in a vacuum. And then you have the production. I think, week 5 is a bit of where that probably does set in a little more where it does make sense to start introducing those into the rankings. And it's not going to be as, crazy of a leap.
So let's go into your subjective part of this. Dan Pizzuta, writer for the 33rd team with us here on the Hoffman Show. Definitely worth checking out the rankings, taking a look at the scores, how they come together, and then, of course, reading the parts that Dan actually writes. Everyone loves the graphic, but don't forget to read the words as well, the blurbs on each guy if you want to know more. But when you take a subjective look, I think last week's super interesting. The success rate and some of those numbers come down for Jayden last week, but some of the EPA per play and some of the other numbers are just fine because he finds these big, monstrous plays. What did you think of the week that he had last week and how he kind of found a different way to get things done and still ultimately put a 30-burger up on what was supposed to be a good Browns defense?
Yeah, I think that was one of the cool things and actually, one of the kind of optimistic things about looking at how he played, where the success rate wasn't quite as good. So on a down-to-down consistency wasn't as good as he'd been in previous weeks. And that was because, Cleveland was doing some things that disrupted what Washington wanted to do, but they were able to find the big plays, like you said. And the way they were able to do that, I think, was a really positive sign for what he's going to do going forward. What is it, the 66-yard pass to Terry McLaurin.
Yeah.
When, as we were, talking earlier in the year, that's probably a ball or a play earlier in the year, weeks 1 and 2, where he gets out of the pocket. He's probably running for a little bit. Last week, his eyes are down the field. He's a wide open McLaurin down the field, makes that throw on the run, and it's a huge game. So those are the types of developments that we're seeing. So when there is kind of a bit of a stall a little bit sometimes in the down-to-down consistency, those big plays are going to come. And I think there were a couple of those this week where the big plays were just there. And I think there was a lot of kind of trust in Daniels too. They put him in empty a lot, which I think was to kind of make Cleveland show what they were going to do on defense, since they were going to blitz a lot. I think that kind of made them declare what the defensive look was going to be. And then that was trust in Jayden Daniels to only have a 5-man protection out of the blitz, kind of make some things happen. The De'Ami Brown touchdown was out of empty. So there were a lot of big plays there where I think they put a lot of trust on him to kind of, be able to be in control of when those blitzes were coming, when they just had a 5-man protection. So I think there's things like that are just little things keep getting added to his plate every week, and it's been really exciting to see.
Again, Dan Pizzuta is our guest here on the Hoffman Show from the 33rd team. So this week they've got Baltimore, a defense that is trying to find exactly the best way to play without Mike McDonald, without 2 other guys who became DCs, brain drain from that staff, but still a lot of good players, including Roquan Smith in the middle. What opportunities exist for Jayden this week in this offense, and then what are kind of the roadblocks that you think could trip them up?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Baltimore, they're definitely still trying to figure out what they are. This is still a very good run defense. So I think that could be really interesting if the run game, which has been really good for Washington, well-designed, kind of opened up a lot of things so far this season. If that gets slowed down a little bit and Jayden Daniels now has to do a little more, traditional drop back where maybe the run isn't working quite as much, I think that might be the kind of hiccup. But the pass coverage is just not completely clicking for Baltimore right now. I think they do have a lot of talent. They're still trying to figure out exactly, who should be playing where. Kyle Hamilton's playing more in the box this season than he was last year when he was kind of moving around a little bit. I think they're still looking for that second linebacker to really play next to Roquan Smith. And Roquan Smith kind of, with so much more on his plate this season, not as good in coverage in the middle of the field as he was last year, really like how he's been in Baltimore really his entire career. So there are just, a few things that aren't working quite as well for Baltimore. And I think when you kind of have a passing offense like Washington does, I think that is going to be what leads them this week because I think Baltimore is still going to be very stout against the run.
Well, I was going to say, if you're Cliff, would you even bother trying? Do you just try to gun it early and test them in the passing game and kind of do the old let's pass to set up the run? Or because I feel like this is an offense that is built on running the football and still you have to try it out and see if you can do it better than, say, a team like Cincinnati, who's just not very good at it. If you're Cliff, how would you approach the actual game planning and the balance and knowing when it's time to pull the plug because maybe they are just this good at stopping it?
Yeah, that's probably a thing where they're probably going to have some, RPOs early to kind of give Jayden the choice to give the looks. If it's a good run look, we'll try to run. If it's not, we can pass, and that's kind of what they, based a lot of the offense on earlier in the season. So I think there's probably going to be a bit of that. I would expect we see, some bootlegs and things to get the the defense moving a little bit, moving some of those pockets to kind of, open up some things. And like you said, I think it is maybe a pass to set up the run kind of thing where we might see a little more spread out to lighten the box a little bit, use some of that to get the pass game going. And then when there are less defenders in the box is when the run can really start going. And that's kind of what Cliff was really good at back in Arizona. So I kind of expect that to still be a thing, kind of create some of those lighter boxes with structure of how the offense is kind of set up in the formation. And that is kind of going to give you a bit of a run advantage if it can against a defense that's still pretty good stopping it.
On the other side of the ball is Dan Pizzuta with us for his Thursday visit here on the Hoffman Show. I am obviously, like most people that would like to see Washington win, fairly concerned about stopping the run. Washington has been very bad at it statistically. Baltimore is averaging, I cannot believe this is a real stat, but we did our preview show this morning and did all my Baltimore prep, and they really are averaging 6.1 yards per carry. If you are Joe Witt Jr. on the defensive side, do you do what Lou Anarumo did and say if it takes 9 in the box to stop it, that's what we'll do and we'll live with the results? Or is there a different, better plan to try to stop Derrick Henry, Lamar, and Justice Hill and everyone else that they'll give carries on Sunday?
Yeah, I think the cool thing for Baltimore as an offense, and definitely not a cool thing as a defense going against them, is they have so many ways to win this year. Like earlier in the season, they were relying a lot on Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson to be kind of that dynamic duo in the run game. And then you did see last week, the Bengals were just like, yeah, we're going to stack the box, have those extra players. And Lamar Jackson was, sitting back in the drop back game, and he had his best game as a passer, and they were able to win that way. And once they kind of, usually you use the run game to kind of wear down a defense, but they were able to use the pass game to do that. And then by the time it gets into overtime, Derrick Henry has that big run because Cincinnati's defense was just exhausted from all the pass rush they were trying to do and all of that. So I don't think there's an easy way to defend Baltimore's defense or Baltimore's offense right now. It's really pick your poison. I think there are probably going to be a lot of teams that are still going to try to stack the box against Baltimore and try to make a Rashad Bateman and Zay Flowers and see if Mark Andrews can actually if him and Lamar Jackson can connect. Like they used to, and just kind of test that. That I'm sure that's probably maybe technically the safer option if you are a defensive coordinator. But I think Lamar to this point has shown he's going to be able to beat that. So that's definitely not a foolproof way to defend this team.
So when to circle all the way back to the QB rankings, where did you have Lamar and how do you grade him out and his continued growth as a passer and how that balances out with the stuff that he's been able to do as a runner since day one?
Yeah, so in the skill set, the rankings, the skill score that I'm doing, right now I have Lamar Jackson third. Which is, he's great. He's, better accuracy than giving credit for, the way he creates, and everything he does. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And right now, I wrote about this, after the game for my 1st and 10 column on Monday. He is better right now than he was at this point last season. When he ended up winning the MVP. So the fact that he does have now a better running game that you actually have to really worry about the other back individually who is in that backfield, which is just kind of giving him more advantageous looks. One, when he is a runner and when he is a passer. Right now, he is playing much better than he was last year, which I think is really cool for Baltimore, definitely scary for the defenses that are going to be going against him.
Dan Pizzuta with us here on the Hoffman Show for just a few more minutes as we look at the Commanders and Ravens, and then, of course, take a look around the rest of the league. And, Dan, we do these power rankings. We call them our tier rankings because ranking 1 through 32 is too hard. And it's like, okay, who lives together in the neighborhood, so to speak? And we do those on Tuesdays. And our top group we call prime contenders. And, there's a distinctive group that we have, but it just doesn't feel like there is a powerhouse in the way that we've had some of the powerhouses of years past. Is that how you feel as well? Is that something that, as you talk to other people around the league, that everyone feels a little bit more beatable, and that even though the Chiefs are undefeated, they haven't set the world on fire yet. They're still clearly trying to figure a lot of stuff out, specifically offensively. I don't think anyone's as scared of the undefeated Vikings with Sam Darnold at quarterback as some of the other teams that we see undefeated through 5 weeks in previous years. Does it feel like there's a real balancing of power this year, or is there a team or a group of teams that you would distinctly put above everyone else and that could compete with previous versions of, the top teams in the league in the last 5 years?
Yeah, I think you're onto something where I don't think there is one fully complete team right now. And I think that's kind of where we are at the top tier. I think if you look at DVOA right now, Minnesota is number 1. They're far and away number 1 on defense, but they're 19th on offense. And they're, been up and down, a little inconsistent when, you have Justin Jefferson wide open, like that's going to work. But, down to down, you are, again, not that worried about a Sam Darnold beating you probably like deep into the playoffs. And then you look at some other teams like Kansas City still figuring out some things on offense. And, that might just be a thing where they spend the regular season just trying some things like they did last year. And then in the playoffs, they're going December into the playoffs, they kind of know what works. We don't have like a San Francisco from last year. That was just an historically good offense. We don't have that type of team this year. So I think everyone is clustered a little bit further together. There's no one crazy standout unit either. And I just don't think we have that like complete of a team that is going to, scare other teams on both sides of the ball, which I think is going to make for a very interesting season that, I don't think there is, one clear, favorite best team, like you said.
Yeah, the Chiefs still like kind of get to be in their own bubble because they did this last year where it's like, are they good? Are they good? I don't know. They won the Super Bowl. Are they good? And it's like, they won the Super Bowl again. So that's nice. And their defense is nasty. The team that, of course, we figured would challenge them is the one that they played in the Super Bowl last year in San Francisco. They play tonight on Thursday Night Football. I guess I'll ask it this way. How many of their problems do you think are fixable without major changes? Like, would they need to make some kind of mega trade at the deadline to acquire some sort of defensive talent? Or is it as simple as like, wait, they'll get a couple guys back, add McCaffrey, or is it schematic? Like, how fixable do you feel like the 49ers problems are to not necessarily win games, because they're obviously still okay in terms of record and where they are in the division, but to be back at the elite level they've been for much of the last decade?
Yeah, I still think they're mostly fine, and it's just going to be small tweaks. The defense it doesn't look great right now. It's still fifth in defensive DVOA, which, it just is kind of, it's playing better than it looks to a sense. And once they get, I think, a little more healthy, I think they're getting a little more pressure than they are actual sacks, which is, something that I think is going to eventually, help them down the line. You had Fred Warner wasn't playing, completely healthy for a stretch. And, when he was, the first 3 weeks, he was probably the best defensive player in football. I think they, don't have that really second or third linebacker a little bit, and they're playing base a little more than I think they were last year. So that's one place where in the middle of the defense, it's not working quite as well, but I don't think that's going to be something that completely derails them. On offense, it's really interesting because they have gone a bunch of games without the full set of playmakers. And that's even if you exclude Christian McCaffrey, who hasn't played yet. George Kittle's been in and out of the lineup and might not play tonight, I believe. Deebo Samuel missed some games. So there's been, just up and downs in there, and they really have put a lot on Brock Purdy. And for the most part, he's been playing pretty well, but there have been things where he has the highest average time to throw in the league, and that's a lot of him just kind of sitting back there and trying to extend some plays, and that's not really the game you want him to play. They're only running play action at about 19% of plays, which is really what you think of with the Shanahan type of offense that kind of can create some of those open throws in the middle of the field. So they've kind of gotten away from that and put a lot more trust in Purdy, and I think we saw kind of last week, I think there were 2 plays that he really tried to extend that he took a sack and it pushed them out of scoring range. So there's just some small things like that. And they've been a really bad red zone offense this year. They were one of the best red zone offenses in the league, and I think that's the place where they really miss Christian McCaffrey because he was one of the most targeted players and had one of the highest rates of rushes in the red zone last year. And that piece missing is kind of something that has stopped them from scoring touchdowns when they get into the red zone. So I'm not sure how they completely fix that, but when you do have the full complement of receivers, that's certainly going to help. But there's just so many little things for San Francisco right now where the margin for error is just not as big as it was last year. So all these little things add up, but there's not just one big problem, which I'm not sure if that's better or worse for them, but it's not something that I think fundamentally can't be fixed incrementally throughout the season.
Right. No, that makes total sense. And I guess one way you fix it is you go to Germany and you have calf surgery that you can't get in America. So, good luck to Christian McCaffrey on that. hope that he's back soon, and we'll see what the Niners can do. They got Seattle tonight. That's going to be an interesting one for sure. Seattle coming off the loss to the Giants. And then we'll got a busy weekend, including Commanders, Ravens this weekend. Dan will be writing all about it at the 33rd Team, his first and 10 column Monday morning. Check out where Jayden winds up in the QB rankings next week as well. And then, Dan, we'll see you back here on the radio next Thursday. Appreciate you as always, sir.
All right. Sounds good. Always a good time.
Hey, this is DA, and you're listening to The Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.